Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm. Now I found these plants at a local big box store suffering badly from a lack of water. And while you might not do this on purpose to your own plants just to see what happens, it does give you a good chance when you see them at the local grocery store, hardware store, big box store, when they've just not watered them well enough, and you can see what happens to their tissues. I'm going to give you a close-up look here. We'll also talk about how to quickly recover them and what parts are unlikely to recover from stress like this. Well, who would do this to their plants? Well, sadly, the answer to that is a larger and larger portion of the people who sell plants are people who only go into the business for a short time during the spring, and they don't know how to water. And so we get something quite uneven like this. And this is the first thing I want to show you, is that this one on the end here obviously is wilting a little bit. It's a bit limp, but overall it still has some turgor to it. Turgor meaning it's sort of blown up like a balloon. And this one here, again, from the same rack, but at the back, is wilting out entirely. And from the soil, it is a light brown all the way to the bottom, and I just about can't feel any moisture on those roots. So clearly the plant isn't going to have an easy time pulling up moisture. And the question would be, are all three of these recoverable? Well, I think my feeling is that if I get water on these very quickly, all three of these plants will survive. But there's a problem with the tissues, and I'm going to move the camera over here to look. Those plants I was looking at were Gaillardia. Now I'm going to look at some Coreopsis here, because you can see the difference between these two plants. And again, it's probably just a matter that the one on the left got more regular water and the one on the right suffered a little more. You can see even on the one on the left here that there's a leaf here that has brown on the tip. And that brown on the tip means that at one point or another it was so short of water that the plant started giving up on some of its tissues. Progressively, it's going to give up some of those leaves, but it's also, in this case, I'm going to pull the camera up a little here so you can see, and maybe I'll zoom a little as well. So you can see that there are flowers there. And these flowers at the top here have just given up. The plant just said, forget it, I don't have enough moisture to maintain my extremities, so it gave up the flowers, and now they've turned into crispy hanging things. So there's a limit to what you can save. So I urgently need to get water into these pots, but the spray hose alone is not going to do the job. What I need for a job like this, for a rescue, is a bucket like this. The reason for that is not very complicated once you understand the principle that the potting soil inside these pots does two things that make it hard to get it wet again. One is that it shrinks away from the side of that pot, and number two is that often potting soil will become hydrophobic when it becomes dry. So shrinking away from the side of the pot, when you water this, when you throw water into the pot, you will find oftentimes that you will throw water into the top of the pot. It'll actually run down the sides of the pot, completely not wetting it, and it'll run straight through those drain holes. The second thing is that dry soil becomes hydrophobic, means it just does not very quickly accept water. So you have to have either repeated watering or a soaking. So you're far better to do a light watering and then repeat every 5 minutes to let that water percolate down through the soil, or, as I say, the shortcut is throw it in a bucket with some water in it, and then it will slowly soak up that water. Let me show you here. I halfway filled a 5-gallon bucket here, and this is the driest of the plants. So I'm going to drop it in there, and the first thing you might notice is that it's just sitting on the top, floating. That's because the soil is so full of air, it's sort of sitting on the top there like an air-filled balloon. Once it starts to soak up that water, and it will do that through the drain holes in the bottom of the pot, it'll actually pull up that water and it'll percolate through the entire soil profile. And an hour later, it has soaked up all that water. You can see that the soil is completely wet, and now we'll set it and we'll see how quickly some of that foliage recovers. All right, I've got the results here. I'm going to give you a close-up view in just a second of these plants that have recovered from wilting. But first, I just wanted to answer a question about whether you should add anything to that water as you try to get your plants to recover from wilt. So the question might be, well, wouldn't it make sense then to feed the plant at the same time, give it some nutrients or fertilizer at the same time? Other people talk about items that are marketed to reduce stress, like B1 solutions or vitamin B1 that's intended to reduce transplant shock or stress, or other people talk about sugar or molasses or honey in that water. And I'm sure there's other people who have promoted other things for this solution. The truth is, you don't need any of that stuff, and the evidence that it works is really, really scant. In fact, you could go counterproductive on it. When you add nutrient solution to your plants, it actually reduces the ability of the plants to take up that water very quickly. So for my money, stick with plain water. It helps your plants to recover quickly. Now in this case, I left this plant here to soak for about an hour, and then I left it in the shade. And so if you want to help this to work at all, that might be one tip that you could use, is after you've got the soil good and soaked, move it to a shady location, and you will very quickly see the leaves start to puff up and the whole plant to start to look a little more upright, a little less wilty, a little less saggy. Now there is a problem that you will not see leaves that have already drooped to the point that they're damaged, that the tissue is damaged. You're not going to see that recover. So here's another example here. I showed you this at the beginning of the video. There's nothing that's going to bring this dead, damaged, blackened tissue back to life. But that said, now that you've brought the plant back into good condition, it will start to grow through that. So your solution then at that point would be to remove the blackened, brown, or damaged material. Keep it in a low stress situation for a while. Eventually resume feeding, and you will have your plants returning into good condition. All right, I hope that's helped you with the question of how you can save a plant that's being severely wilted, especially let's call them the bargain bin plants from the mass merchants. And if you have any questions, please leave those below the video.